our continuous program to present you updates with some activities that are happening in the mining sector. Let me introduce the head table for those of you who may be unaware. In addition to Minister Prasad, on his immediate left, we have the Commissioner GGMC, Mr. Rick Vera. To my left, the Chairman of the GGMC, Mr. Clinton Williams. We're going to begin with Minister Prasad this morning. We're going to give us some general overviews of what's happening in the sector. Commissioner is going to speak about some enforcement activities and some other work of the Commission, while the Chairman will speak of what's happening at the board level. Thereafter, we'll feed a few questions relevant to this morning's discussion, and we call it there. So I invite Minister to give some brief remarks.
Morning, everyone and colleagues. As was pointed out by the Permanent Secretary, we thought that the time has come for us to provide you general updates as what's taking place in the mining sector. The mining sector, as you know, is a very critical component of the national economy and a sector which is very dynamic. Also a sector that is very vulnerable to what takes place internationally in terms of price movements, and even as some of us may not know, even what's happening with the weather itself too can have an impact on the sector. The mandate that we've given the regulatory agency, the main regulatory agency, and their other associated agencies that work with the mining sector within the natural resources sector, is one, to facilitate in terms of production, working with our miners and investors, but also ensuring that there's compliance and enforcement, both with our social as well as our environmental responsibilities. And the Chairman and the Commissioner certainly will update you on some of those activities that we have embarked on and what we are looking. From the outset, let me say that we continue to look very carefully at the situation of declaration, if you look in terms of coal, as we continue to monitor other minerals and other activities within the broader mining sector. And so the issue of declaration itself is something that continues to be a matter of concern. And based on the discussions we've had with the GGDMA and the work we've done ourselves with the various agencies, we've also noted that weather as well as price and even the issue of cost of production has in a way limited or seen in some level reduced activity in some of the mining districts, in some of the 6 mining districts. And so both at the board level and in our interaction with the mining community, we have been exploring ways in which further support could be provided so that we can see a ramp up or even a return to the 2013 levels of output and ultimately in terms of declaration. Some of the issues that have been identified by the mining community has been, one, the availability of more mining lands for both small, medium as well as large scale miners. And what have we done in this regard? First and foremost, after several years, we have concluded, based on the work done by the Closed Area Committee, chaired by the Chairman of the GGMC board, we have concluded preparations and plans to launch the first auction. And again, based on representation by the GGDMA, we had originally scheduled this to be in the first week of August. They have asked that we put it into the second week, and so we're looking at the auction being done on August the 11th. That is in terms of targeting larger areas and being done through a very competitive as well as a very open process. For the small miners themselves too, especially persons who say, well, we do not have lands to work on, we have lotteries in the 6 mining districts, and these lotteries are scheduled for the 18th of August. And so these 2 important activities will see hundreds of individuals who will now have, who do not have and currently do not have access to their own properties, will be able to be given the opportunity. But further to that, and in terms of addressing the concern, we've also seen that we've been very diligent and very proactive in terms of processing applications and processing necessary permits. And I can give you an example. Take, for instance, the prospecting permits medium scale, which is called PPMS. The GGMC has been able to issue 727 within the January to May period. And this is in fact a 68% increase on what was processed for the same period last year. If you look in terms of mining permits, 469 mining permits were issued, and this accounts for an increase of 89.6% for the same period last year. And we're talking about January to May. And if you look in terms of prospecting licenses, the board, based on the work done at the GGMC board, 18 were approved. Again, this represents a significant increase, but this time 38% increase or above what was processed and approved for the same period. What these allow us to, one, in terms of promoting our quest to have legal mining activities, reducing the delays and reducing the reasons for persons to be engaged in illegal mining activities, and thus, one, denying the state of revenue, breaching our Mining Act and relevant regulation, but also ensuring that we have environmentally sound mining and mining that can be properly managed. Further to that, we've stepped up our geological work done at the GGMC, because historically the complaint has been that due to the lack of adequate or sufficient geological information, see that miners make investments and they're not sure what the resource potential of the area, and then they have to go and expend resources, one, money, but also they end up damaging the environment. So we've stepped up our geological work, and a number of geological and geochemical surveys were done in different areas, and these surveys would have covered the Kuyuni area, the 5-star Northwest area, and Aruwai in the Mazaruni area, some examples. We've also just retained the services of an advisor to the GGMC, an expert in this regard, who will reinforce the work in terms of leadership, in terms of implementation, in terms of strategic planning for the exploration and geological work done. So this continued to be a priority. And so this was in direct response to the mining community. The lack of land, the lack of geological, and the evidence is there that we've been able to do so. Similarly, we've had dedicated and focused attention on moving the large mining projects forward, namely ETK Sand Springs, Guyana Goldfields, and Troy Resources. And we've developed various protocols with the agencies that come outside of the natural resources sector, take for instance the GRA, whereby we can move very quickly, very efficiently, very expeditiously, so that we can realize these investments at the end of the day. So that has been one particular issue that we've put attention. The second area too, in terms of hinterland infrastructure and access to mining lands. The current rainy season has dampened, in some areas, the mining activities, but also it has restricted access in some regard. Some areas where you could have access by road, you now have to use boat. Some areas, the water levels have been so high that operations have had to cease until further notice. And the priority has been given to the issue of road work done. And the board and the commission itself again has been tasked with stepping up, one, identifying priority, and based on discussions with the GTDMA, we've identified a number of roads, a number of access that have been priority areas. Take for instance Peruni Road, just recently a contract was signed based on an open competitive process for around $43 million. We've also, that is for the rehabilitation, and this is expected to go based on additional works that have to be done to $160 million. We've also done some work, a contract signed recently for $70 million for rehabilitation of the road from the Brian Sucre Junction to Madia. And there are also a number of other roads that we've looked at, and so the total expenditure, the GGMC in terms of road work, will be in the vicinity of $1.5 billion. This is dedicated work being done for mining access and mining roads. This hasn't taken into account what the Public Works Ministry, which is the key agency, the key government agency in charge of the management and the maintenance of our road network throughout the country, particularly in this case, the hinterland. So we continue to put a lot of attention in this regard. We continue to work with the Ministry of Public Works in terms of air access, ensuring that airstrips and various facilities are adequately maintained. As you know, today there are a lot of air access, air transport in this regard. As much as we look to develop the ground network and the river network, a lot of air support is being taken in this regard. Dealing with the issue of improved recovery and addressing the issue of cost, as you might have heard earlier, the government had approved $1 billion for a revolving fund to support the mining sector, particularly small and medium-scale miners, to adopt new technology, new processes, and look at equipment that are relevant. And a working group, a broad-based working group, was set up to look at this particular issue, and they have been doing some work in this regard. The GGMC itself has been tasked with ramping up and broadening its work in terms of exposing miners, particularly small and medium-scale miners, to new technologies, and a number of equipment have been deployed so we can demonstrate how it is that we can improve recovery, especially in the area of fine gold particles, and looking at what are the types of technology. Not everywhere in Guyana you find gold nuggets. Some of it, and in some areas you have predominantly the fine gold particles, and you also want our mining communities in this regard. We've also looked in terms of the diversification, in terms of looking at mineral diamonds, looking at other resources that we've had, and we've had a number of discussions in this regard and preparing ourselves in this area. And moving quickly into that is the issue of land reclamation in mining areas. And just recently, the project been able to move forward in this regard. We've identified a number of areas, Peruni, Conwarook, and Amadia areas, where we're going to be doing some reclamation activities, as well as working with the bauxite companies, because whilst we want to promote mining, we want to ensure that it's good business, we also want to adequately prepare ourselves in terms of looking at the environmental challenges that are associated with mining in this regard, as we move away from mercury, as we move away from practices that are uneconomical and harmful to the environment. At the same time, we are looking how it is we can support this regard. So we're not leaving it up to the mining community alone, but also we are getting involved in this particular area. The Commissioner will talk a little some of the work that we plan in dealing with illegal mining activities, and I wish to say that commencing Monday, I think it is, we will be mainstreaming now aerial surveillance. So it's no longer alone dealing with what's on the ground and getting information, but he will expand in some of those areas, as well as some other activities we want to speak about now, and some we wish not to speak about at this point in time. But just to say that we are moving to another level in terms of doing air surveillance, as we are doing satellite imagery in terms of looking at forest change, real-time satellite imagery in this regard. So we're looking to bring technologies in this regard. The Guyana Mining School itself and training center, if those of you who've been following the newspapers would have seen that we've advertised a number of courses. We've been targeting women miners. We've targeting those at the large mine, particularly in the quarry business, and even the deep mining areas in terms of dealing with explosive. We look at new technologies, look at GPS training, and in fact we've had training programs whereby in excess of 250 persons have been exposed to some form of training or the other. This will take, for instance, at this point in time last year, where the school thus being conceptualized, you can imagine what it would have been. And now the people who are going out there now, they have some knowledge of the new techniques and what it is that we're doing. Over the next 6 months, we hope to also train close to 180 prospectors. So if we're talking about doing prospecting and proper geological work, and these are not individuals from the university, these are individuals who are in the field, and we want them to be exposed. And we are making this available to them so that we can develop the capacity, and they can also support us in this regard. Very, very quickly, there are some other issues that we've been speaking to with the mining community in terms of looking at the issues of work permits, working with the Ministry of Home Affairs, especially those who have non-national resilience and others, and how it is we can move those forward, and there has been some progress in this regard. The hinterland security issue continues to be a priority, and a number of meetings were facilitated between the leadership of the police force and the mining community, and they have been looking at some key issues such as the establishment of new police outposts, especially in areas where you would not have fixed police presence. We have been working in terms of providing equipment and different wherewithal in this regard, and so that continues to be a work in progress. In terms of bringing down costs for the mining community, we've been able to facilitate a fuel importation license for the GGDM, and currently the GGDM is moving very swiftly in setting up its own fuel importation and distribution network so as to bring down the cost of fuel. And you know, and again, the ministry work and our agencies are working very closely with the GGDMA in terms of walking them through of that particular process. Representations were made for duty-free waivers for Martins and for certain types of vehicles being used, and I wish to say that we have been again facilitating and working very closely in bringing those issues to a positive conclusion in this regard. Coming back to where I started out, in terms of gold production and gold declaration, the latest numbers we've had show that we've seen a decrease by just about 16%. The mining community is optimistic that with the additional support and focus, we can see improved and increased production in this regard. We've also seen that the Bartica office, we're looking very quickly to see how we can reopen that particular office. Also, we're talking to the commercial banks themselves. The charity office now will very soon, and I wish to announce, will be very soon operated and managed by a private dealer based on some discussions and decisions of the Guyana Gold Board. Also, the Port Kaituma, very soon that sub-office will be opened, and that too will be operated by a private financial institution. Even as we build and streamline the Guyana Gold Board, we are also looking at the participation of the private financial sector, financial institutions, in dealing with those particular issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are broadly some of the issues we wanted to update you from my perspective, and certainly both the chairman and the commissioner will augment and focus in on some other areas.
Yeah, let's invite the chairman to give a brief as to what's happening on the board, and then the commissioner on the operational issues.
Thank you very much, Minister. This is my first, I think, interaction with you as a team. I've had some discussions, I believe, with a few of you at some time. The board, as you would normally expect, work is influenced by the policy and functions as enshrined in the regulations. Some of the issues that the minister referred to earlier are the very issues that are considered by the board: the policy, options, and efficiency in decision making and implementation. One of the critical areas that we have been looking at is this road, hinterland road infrastructure and access to the mining districts. And whereas we have been voting for sums over the years to be spent on rehabbing these roads, we have had to rethink that strategy a little bit within recent times. And we are going to be working towards a more holistic approach that would include, for example, some work on whether the designs of those roads, particularly in areas where the weather would significantly impact on the condition of the road from season to season, and see what those design conditions are the best for those particular environments. Second is to try and, instead of going through the entire process of going out there and advertising and taking a long 3 or 4 months to do the contract, a contractor to deliver on a program that we have implemented, to try and implement a mechanism whereby we have a number of contractors pre-qualified. And so once the deficiencies are observed, we can react quickly to sort of fix them. As the minister said earlier, whereas That Peruni one was intended to, we did the original survey, 63 million is now telling us it might be twice or three times that figure. So we're taking that proactive move as a policy to ensure that we can do preventive maintenance much more than we do now corrective or repair work on these roads. In addition to that, we were hoping that we can perhaps outsource agencies outside of those that are currently being utilized to fix these roads within these particular areas. Because the road infrastructure is crucial. If you don't have the roads and they can't get into the mines, and the production obviously will be adversely affected. We're hoping also in that regime of strategy that we can develop a partnership with institutions like IST and University of Guyana to bring those into the picture, to learn what is happening in the environment there and to therefore to be part of the improvement process, particularly in relation to designs and what we use to compact the road so they can withstand the various water patterns. Now, we have also had to ensure that the mining districts are supported by facilities that which the mines officers can occupy and provide service at site for the miners. And so that is why the expenditure in that area also has gone up in terms of making facilities responsive to the needs of the miners, as well as to have information there that is sufficient to allow them to go there and ply their trade. May so went at length to explain to you what are some initiatives we've taken to deal with the question of new areas of mining, the medical information that is required, obviously, as best as we can, to ensure that the areas that are being sort of made available does in fact present the best option for finding the diamonds. So that with these interventions, we are almost certain that by the end of the year, we ought to be able to return at least to last year's performance in terms of production and recoveries. As you know, there's a lag from the time you produce to the time you declare it. Illegal mining, we have taken a totally new strategy, and we're hoping that we can get some of the areas, the residents within the mining districts to help us. Because as you know, it's a very difficult thing to go in there and to take action like seizing a piece of equipment and to get it out. Might be more costly than in fact what illegal activity that was going on in the field. So we have to find out new strategies, and one of which the Minister indicated will be these surveillance, which we will start pretty soon, and which will be random, so you won't know where we're going and when. So you can't necessarily predict and disappear once we arrive. An important aspect of our work has been the need for us to ramp up, as it were, the policy options as it relates to what other minerals we need to pursue. Because renewable resource like gold or diamond will not be there forever. And so the board has taken a stand on this, and in fact, very soon we're going to present to the minister and the ministry a short-term, a medium-term strategic plan, as it were, for the sector that will be focusing on this particular initiative. What are the minerals we ought to pursue? What means we ought to use to pursue it? And we have some issues here which we are attempting to resolve. Some are legal. For example, at the moment, there are many other minerals, for example, in a single property outside of gold and diamond, with platinum, silicon. And so, whereas in the past, the permits, whether large or medium scale permits for exploration, was providing for a single or two minerals. Now we have to try and get to the others that are there, so we can optimize the investment that is being put in place. And so we have to fix that from a number of perspectives, legally and otherwise. So we do those regulations. And that is where, the minister said, the consultant will help us come up with strategies that will allow us to do that. Another area that I think I should bring to your attention in terms of the policy initiatives of the board is this whole question of training and development. As you know, we are also at the moment, and this might necessarily not be forever, involved in hydrocarbon exploration as well. And during a recent visit that Minister and I made to Calgary, which, as you know, Canada, is one of the centers of excellence in terms of the performance of the sector, to have some arrangement and agreement with them to allow us to work with them in terms of the regulatory side, as well as for expertise in ensuring that what happens out there in the oil rigs, even during the exploration stage, that we have the fullest opportunities for exposures and competence. We are also in the business of low carbon strategy and development initiative. And some people are saying that the two things are so diverse that they are contradictory to each other. And therefore, gold mining should step aside for forestry and forest activities. We don't share that view, and therefore we're trying to get some expertise also to help us how to craft the policy that would engage us in both activities in an optimal way and satisfy a multi-objective approach. So at the level of the board, we're working on all these initiatives to ensure that we can survive a sector. And ultimately, obviously, we have to revise a mining policy that takes cognizance of all of these impacting and sometimes differential sort of directions. I will stop there and allow the Commissioner to indicate precisely some of the actual work.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, I'll give you a brief overview of some of the challenges we face in the mining sector for the first half of the year. As we know, mining is an non-renewable resource, and after years of exploiting the areas that are very close or relatively known, the miners are now going deeper into the hinterlands. So this is, as the Minister and Chairman mentioned, the reason for us taking a strong approach to providing access roads to some of those new areas. Coupled with that, we are faced with a challenge of our laws allow persons to locate claim by what we refer to in engineering as a chain and compass survey. And the descriptions are so vague, so whenever somebody finds gold, they move the claim and put it there. And there's a lot of litigations against GGMC and other persons involved in the sector. So what we're trying to do now is to revise those regulations to ensure that people use GPS coordinates in locating the claims so that we can have better control over in that aspect. The other one, the other area we're concentrating on is the surveillance, as the Minister said, and this is necessary because what we find is whenever we make an intervention, the miners will move from that area into another area onto somebody else's property without permission, and the gold we believe is sold outside the normal arrangement. And this is an area we support. We get some support from the Guyana Police Force, as well as the Army, among other agencies. The rehabilitation, of course, the illegal mining is causing a lot more deforestation that we had envisioned. We don't have any control. We need to look to see where they're going, where they're operating, etc. And the surveillance will definitely help. When you're on the ground, you don't see those things. Let me see what we just signed a contract to complete the Port High Street building, and this would allow us to have more officers involved in our monitoring and other exercises in the interior to ensure that people comply with the law. And we'll be making several other interventions on the ground, like the Operation El Dorado during the last half of this year, at least one or two every month, to specific areas to complement the air surveillances. And this is about what the Minister and the Chairman had already give you an overview of what intent is, and this is about the compliance aspect of it.
All right. Not too sure if Minister would like to say a few more words before we go into the any questions or so that we have.
But just to reinforce that we, as you know, the last week of August is mining week, and we're moving steadfastly in that particular area. So we just want to sound that awareness and a number of activities that we plan, and those will be announced shortly by the chairman and the commissioner.
And just to add that this year focus will be the districts themselves rather than Georgetown.
Okay. If you can go directly into the questions, just identify yourself and you ask the question.
Mr. Sir, could you say what's going on? What's the latest with respect to the uranium exploration and also the offer by Iran to assist with mapping of Guyana? What's his name?
Iran.
Iran?
Yeah.
No, well, I think there's a government kind of arrangement that we are not brought into this.
As far as I'm aware, there have been no updates provided to the ministry or to the sector on those earlier discussions. And I'm not, at this point in time, I'm not hopeful based on the information not available.
So is it shelved?
Well, we have to be guided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and these matters. So we await guidance.
And does it?
But I must say that our geological work that we're doing, we're not sitting waiting on any one party or one country. And you heard the initiatives that we've outlined. In addition to that, we're collaborating with the Canadian government. We have discussions going on with Chile. We're looking with different other parties whereby we can, as it were, develop the update our geological map in this regard.
But Minister, being the minister responsible for the sector, isn't that the government is no longer interested in the offer because of international political consideration?
I would defer this matter to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
And the other one is in relation to uranium. What's going on?
I know a company was working in the Northeast area. I don't think there's any interest any longer in that aspect.
What
No, they didn't find anything of interest.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a number of factors based on the briefing and what I've seen. One is that they did the prospecting, and then they had to mobilize more resources to engage in prospecting, and then Fukushima disaster took place in Japan, and that dampened the whole movement in terms of nuclear technology for energy production. And that had an impact on, because this company was also on the Canadian Stock Exchange, and so that affected the company's ability to mobilize resources to continue further exploration. So again, like in this regard, that might be more at a standstill. And also the prospecting results, as the Commissioner pointed out, have not been impressive.
So they packed up their equipment and left?
There's not an interest, but they're not active.
But the area has been secured given regulatory consideration?
Once it remains
Under
intact, there's no need for
surface mining, that's not.
Marcel Stubblefield. Minister, much emphasis has been placed on this aerial surveillance. Given the thick forest canopy, how do you know that the surveillance is going to be effective and it's not just working with you, just going to be flying over, wasting fuel?
I will assure that it will not be a waste of effort and fuel. But given the nature of mining, it would require some sort of open. You can't. It's difficult for you to be mining at there will be some level of removal of, and then you will be able to see. But also, whilst you talk about aerial, it's not just they will jump on the aircraft and proceed. It will be also based on certain intelligence in certain specific areas. So it is supplementing. It is not ending what you currently have, but it's reinforcing what you have. There's even the talk about using drones too in this regard. So these are possibilities that we're looking at, because the reality is, we're looking for illegal activity. We're not only targeting the Guyanese, and we know they're very legitimate miners and so forth, but we've heard about others, for other individuals who've come in and are threatening our resources.
And you mentioned something about the GGDMA and this waiver. What is it?
For Matson, for vehicles.
Yes. No. The fuel.
Oh yes, not waiver for fuel, a license, a fuel
The
importation.
license. Could you, for the layman, explain that?
What that means? Yeah, sure. Currently, fuel accounts to what is it, 20%?
40%.
40% of the cost, and a lot of the operators in the sector, they will have to buy it from the dealers. They've complained, rightfully or not so, they've complained that the markup charged by the current dealership community is too high, and they came to the government and said, we can bring down the cost by 10-12% market if you allow us to bring our own fuel in. And so the position was, yes, we will do that. And so we facilitated that. So they will be able now to bring fuel for their own use.
From where?
Different sources, Trinidad, Curacao, I'm not sure where, because this is something that they're doing on their own. Our involvement is the licensing and allowing them to be permitted to do so. They will then have to go and secure this legally. Right, through the Ghana Energy Authority and the Prime Minister's office.
Stanley Chronicle. Geological information, and I think this is a matter of urgent importance for the miners, and I was wondering if we can zoom in a bit more on what we have in mind in terms of providing the kind of information, perhaps the geographic, perhaps a program of work to provide that kind of information to miners.
All right. We have some technical assistance programs that go to specific mining districts and assist the miners with basic geology. There's a mining school that trains them for prospecting. There's a form of gathering geological information. And then there's our regional geochemical work, which is on a bigger scale. And for this year, I think we did over 4,500 square kilometers of geochemistry. So this information can be used, but the miners themselves, like any other business, need to invest in exploration to determine if there is sufficient mineralization to warrant an investment. You can't do it for every miner. It's virtually impossible. It's too costly. We provide a bigger picture, and they fill in with the smaller, with more details.
Where have these activities in geochemicals been concentrated? Which mining districts?
We had Kiyuni, Northwest, and Mazuri.
Any projections to go into any other?
Well, we just got the information. We normally send the samples up to Canada for analysis. And we analyze for 149 different minerals.
No, I'm talking about other geographic, other geological districts.
No, let me answer that, please.
Any projections?
What? That's what we do in the commission. But we also, as we said earlier, we give out prospecting permits last year, and the intent of those permits disregarded is the very information, but it is some of the risks of the investor, which we were allowing, and that is now brought back to the commission and put into the map. So you have a more comprehensive analysis. So yes, other areas are part of the system in the sense that we're giving out these prospecting licenses to do precisely what we do.
This information is accessible to the miner?
They can't give the miner information while the property is held by
somebody else.
If it comes back to the state,
then we
can make it okay.
Let's take, for instance, the lottery and for the auction. Those areas are being made public. They will have access to the information that is available for those particular areas.
Minister, you spoke about an advisor to GGNC. That's one person?
Yeah.
So who is that person?
Dr. Linda Easterman.
Linda.
Yeah, Linda Eason. You can get the correct spelling of the name. I don't want to pretend.
In your works in the hinterlands, in finding other places to open up, do you, or does your team liaison with residents of neighboring communities to see how mining would affect those communities, given that these are nomadic people to some extent?
You know, it's the social component of the work that we do in facilitating and encouraging responsible mining is very important. And the officers themselves who go, there's a lot of interaction, both by the officers of the GGMC, you have forestry officers, and you have officers who belong to the agency outside of the sector, whether they're from law enforcement or they're doing various other types of activities. So you have this informal as well as this formal type of interaction. The Ministry of Agrarian Affairs also very crucial in this regard, and ensuring that the activities, they do not impact negatively on the social and the developmental well-being of adjoining communities. At the end of the day, what you seek to do is to bring development and benefits to those communities. If you're mining an adjoining community, you hope that they will flourish, that you hope that they will directly benefit. So there is that encouragement, not only respect it, but also in a material way, in terms of jobs, in terms of opportunities, and even looking at activities in terms of after mining, because you don't want communities to, as it were, to disappear, to dwindle in both economic and social strength after mining would have ended. But you also use mining to facilitate successor activities, so these communities can continue to be viable and to be occupiable, as it were, in this regard. So there is that thinking, there is that outlook. So it is not ignored. We can always say that more needs to be done, but it's not a factor that is being ignored in our work and what we do.
And in summary,
and let me just say too, and I'll ask Chairman to come in, the Commission to come in here. We also take, for instance, our Amerindian community, some of the resources that are collected are handed over to the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, paid over to the Amerindian Affairs Ministry. In fact, we should be making another payment soon, based on those are to be invested back into those communities. And so they go, you have some communities that are close to mining areas, and what we do is some of the proceeds from there, it goes into this fund that the Ministry of Amerindian, and then it goes in terms of wider developmental activities. So communities that are directly or indirectly, and even communities that are contiguous, and those that may be miles away, we also look at the mechanism how they can benefit, as it were, and to be part and integrated.
To cover that, we have one of our directors or observer, one of board is from the Ministry of Agriculture, their representative, and the chairman of the Tushal Council. He's also on the board. Coupled with that, we have several community rangers. These are persons from the community that monitor mining operations in the vicinity of the area. So we have that kind of collaboration with the community and the mining sector. And they report to us. We pay in fact, they're employees of GTMC.
Let me just add to that. So far as the relationship extends to the large-scale mining companies. As you know, Minister said we are about to enter into two more. We are already on board with Ghana Goldfields and Troy currently. And we're about to enter into another one with ETK Sand Springs. These are large-scale projects. And whereas in the past, corporate social responsibility activities were limited to perhaps desirable set of consequences for these communities, we're now insisting, we're treating these agreements to insist that there's specific deliverables that can be quantified and which will benefit these communities during the mining season and thereafter. By establishing small business enterprises and activities like providing food for the communities, transportation logistics, schools and educational institutions, aquatic farming, and so on. So we're treating even the large-scale projects to support any potential dysfunction that will happen during the mining period and obviously a continuation of some business activity after the mining period of time.
My final question for Minister. You would have outlined a series of remedial action, should I say, to help with
The reclamation project?
the increase in gold production. Has GGMC now accepted that it isn't a case of hoarding among miners, it's a case of just low production because of all of these factors?
We have not accepted or unaccepted any factor, because we're still working very closely with the mining communities to determine some of the contributing factors. And so it continues to be work in progress. For us, and our immediate emphasis is we have looked at the stats, we have officers out there, we've engaged the mining community, and it is how it is that we can pool our efforts together in ensuring that we support, we sustain these activities, and that we have a level of declaration that is realistically and directly linked to the level of production.
So do you think that they're still, my question is quite blunt, do you think that they're still hoarding and or smuggling?
You have to first ask me whether I thought earlier to still think.
Your president would have said that that was the major factor.
Yes.
So it's against that background that your agency's representative.
At this point in time, I will say that we're doing some assessments to determine there are a number of factors that have combined, certainly together, and it is our obligation and it is our intention to work with stakeholders and to address whatever those factors are.
What is your assessment so far at the
I would not want to preempt, because I haven't consulted with the other parties in this assessment as to what our conclusions will be. I think it will be unprofessional of me to jump ahead, inclusively agreeing on what are the key drivers for me to jump ahead and say this is what we've arrived at.
So why did the government say that earlier? Did you conduct assessments and come to the conclusion
the government, whatever positions have been articulated, would have been based on information supplied. Whether those information, now you go through a process in terms of further re-examination and engagement of stakeholders, is an activity we're currently engaged in.
So, but is government embarrassed by the outcry coming from the Miners Association? That
Embarrassed or not embarrassed? I mean, this should not be an exercise of what opinion is expressed. Everyone is entitled to a view, and for us, it is our obligation here within the sector to constructively look at issues, and at the end of the day, ensure that the conclusions that we arrived at guide our action. And that is why I've outlined a number of activities here that we believe will move us to a better and a desired situation.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Jim Paul Gang, thanks, sir. You said it was 60% decrease in declaration.
Yeah, compared with last year.
What period?
Same period.
Oh, you took current till last night.
Okay. And what figure does this represent?
I can provide the numbers to you. They are available. I just wanted to give you the broad numbers. I can actually give it to you now, but I always like to recheck my numbers. So that's why I'm staying with percentage in this regard. But what we're talking about is, based on the numbers available, last year it could have been 278,127 ounces. So far, it is 233,305. And I must say that the mining committee says that they see that this now we can get back to a very close position and even get back within our target range too.
This is obvious because
Yeah.
of the veteran.
Yeah. Weather is an important factor too.
what are the prices?
In addition to prices.
No, this is the price.
Prices at 12.94 this morning, they move. And I've outlined a number of factors that influence.
How would you respond to the criticism that the mining sector is a lawless zone?
Well,
Lawless?
Quote unquote lawless zone.
it's a lawless zone.
Yes.
Whoever is making those assertions is perhaps is out of touch with reality, and I would invite them for a presentation with the technical officers, and I also will encourage them to be part of the Mining Week activities, because we will be going to all the mining districts. Yes, there are infractions, but where else are there infractions in other sections of the Guyanese community? And I always say that, you know, we try to stigmatize mining, and I you know, as someone who has, you know, love the media, I also see the media doing that too. You know, someone gets robbed, if the heaven forbids that the man is a miner, but when the carpenter or when the accountant, you don't see the headlines, accountant found something, or...
I don't know why I use that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's offensive to the mining community. So I would encourage the mining community, the media, not to contribute to this perception that is, I'm not sure where it's coming from, of lawlessness within the community, because they are hardworking people. I don't think any of us in this room here can understand and appreciate how hard it is to be engaged in the risk that you're exposed to. And, you know, so I would say that we are making efforts to address whatever challenges there are. I refer to security, we refer to the social, the environmental, the work that we're doing, because we want the sector to continue to shine and to prosper, and not to become an object of insults. And you hear people make these comments. Groups even sometimes make the comments about it. And so I say, let us look at realistically, let us look at it objectively. And yes, there are difficulties. Yes, there are infractions, but that is not what defines the mining community and mining in Guyana.
We take two more questions and then we wrap up.
One more question. Any consideration for value-added gold? Value-added gold?
It has always been a priority in our quest, because, and in fact, if you talk to those who have been involved in the industry, given the unstable price, it is found that when you do value-added, you have much more stability in terms of pricing. There've been a proposal that is under consideration for a gold refinery in Guyana. That continues to receive the attention of the various parties outside of the ministry itself. There's also, we've been talking to the jewel production community to look at how it is that we can expand and enhance a jewelry production sector, not only for local and domestic consumption, but to become an exporter of jewelry. And so we have discussions taking place with even with producers themselves, and even those who are involved in the processing itself. So those are some of the broad discussions. So the intention, and it has always been the ambition of the sector to be much more value-added. And in times of unstable prices, something happens in Europe, something happens in the Middle East, you get a good or bad job report of the US economy, I can tell you it has a direct correlation to gold prices. And so you cannot plan and operate in that environment, especially when we look at cost and so forth. So to bring much more stability and predictability, value added is the way to go.
Mr. Williams, has the board come to a decision as yet with regard to Bauxite and whether it owes royalties or not?
The matter is still under consideration.
But
As I said then, it is still under consideration.
You know, it is not a simple issue whether or not. We have to go back to the agreements that were entered into.
Exactly.
You know, you were talking about an industry that was more or less collapsed in Linden. Linden bauxite you're talking about. Then there were efforts to resuscitate through the involvement of private parties. That eventually led us, and the government, in its interest, to revitalize and to revive the industry, was able to attract. It is not a case whereby it's allowing or not allowing Bauxite to pay. Bauxite has been making its contribution to the national revenue in various taxes in this regard. The issue is whether the conditions and the incentives that were provided for allow also for these additional payments to be made. And at this stage here, we are currently in discussions with GRA, Bauxite itself, our legal advisors, and for us to have a conclusive position on this matter. For us to have, and so if there will not be a single obligation that Bauxite, under the law and under the agreement center, that we will allow Bauxite to violate our law. they will have to honor all those obligations. But you have different in position. And so those are being reconciled through proper and comprehensive advice. This is not a rush. This is not, for me, an issue who write what and who didn't write what. If you notice, our participation in the public debate has been studied, and we try to be as much more informative, because we have to make assessments and decisions, we have to honor agreements, and we have to appreciate what it is we're doing going forward. So this is not a case of both sides, you pay or you don't pay. It is a case of what arrangements, what agreements are in place, and ensuring that we honor as much as we want to honor those agreements, the other parties themselves to honor those agreements.
All right, final question,
Minister, you spoke of recovery and moves to adopt new measures. Can you give us an update on that ongoing process phase of Mercury? And secondly, the IASD at the Miners Conference, I think,
yes,
had made a presentation on the use of coconut husk. And that would give a high recovery rate. Has there been any interest?
Yes.
Mercury is used as a final cleanup stage, not a part of. When we say mercury-free mining, it's actually mercury-free processing. Mining is a different aspect from processing. What we're doing, there is a group set up to look at alternatives to mercury, and they'll be meeting. I had a meeting last Wednesday, and they're continuing to meet and deliberate on matters relating to that aspect, including the University of Yale, the Golden Diamond Mines Association, Georgia Mines, and the ISD. With respect to the activated charcoal, this is a system that's used for cyanidation, and this is mostly for the larger companies. Just the company, and probably if we could scale it down to the smaller portions. So ISD starts to look at the possibility of us using the coconut shell to produce activated charcoal, which is a process used in cyanidation.
And what if miners?
Ongoing, we haven't, it is not concluded. But this will be, we'll have to do education, awareness, and demonstrations, and field testing, etc., before we get it out to the
And also cyanide use.
Well, we have some cyanide.
Cyanide utilization, yeah. We got to be very careful. The work is going on within the institutions, and when we finish, we go into the field and do the testing.